The quarterback position is the most important position on an NFL field, and there are a lot of really, really good quarterbacks coming into the league. So I decided to rank them, giving you guys my top 10 quarterbacks in the 2024 NFL Draft. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, coming in at number 10, I do have Joe Milton, and I feel like I'm probably going to get a lot of people disagree with me in the comments for this number 10 selection, and I really like Joe Milton. I had him a bit higher before the season. Obviously, he hasn't played the best, so he has dropped a bit, but I still think he's a top 10 quarterback in this class, especially when people like Quinn Ewers, Riley Leonard, Shadur Sanders, and all of those guys are returning to college, most likely. So I think Joe Milton does deserve a top 10 selection, and starting off, he's 6'5", 235 pounds, so he's built like a tank. So far, in 2023, he had 2,813 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, 7 rushing touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. So, not the best season stat-wise, but also not the worst either. For some of his pros, I have his arm. He has probably the best arm in college football, and if he does get drafted, or once he does get drafted, he'll probably have a top 3 to 5 arm in the NFL. Like, the guy's arm is insane. He can make the throw from anywhere on the field. He can get it there very, very quickly. He can throw it probably 70, 80 yards. But as you can see, as one of the cons, his accuracy is a problem. He might be nicknamed Overthrow Joe for a reason. On deep balls, he can get it there, but he's going to pass it way over the receiver's head, probably 30% of the time. So he's almost similar to like an Anthony Richardson when it comes to his arm talent. He's got a cannon of an arm, but his accuracy is a bit of a concern. I think Joe Milton's accuracy is a bit more of a concern than a guy like Anthony Richardson was. But if you want to think of him like that, think of him like an Anthony Richardson arm talent guy. Like I mentioned earlier, his size is unbelievable. He's built like a Cam Newton or Anthony Richardson. And then for his release, like he has a super quick release, which I really like in my quarterbacks. I don't really like quarterbacks that have that really like elongated or awkward throwing motion, because believe it or not, receivers are affected by a quarterback's throwing motion. A more quick and compact one is easier for the receiver to get the, kind of read the ball, as opposed to an elongated one kind of throws the timing off. So he does have a quick release, which I do count as a pro. And then cons, this was his 6th season as a college football player. He spent 3 of the years in Michigan, and then he also spent 3 in Tennessee. And believe it or not, this past year was his only full started year. So he's a bit higher in age. He will be going into the league probably 24 years old. And he doesn't have that much experience either. He's a 1-year starter for the most part. Like, he's played here and there the other seasons, but this was his first full-time starting. And then accuracy I talked about earlier. So I could see Joe Milton maybe not even getting drafted, but I do think he'll be a priority UDFA if he doesn't get drafted. So I would almost guarantee to see him on a preseason squad, and then we'll see where he goes from there. I don't think he's ever going to be a starter in the league, but I could see him being a solid backup in the league, or I could also see him falling out. Like this 10th spot, guys like Michael Pratt, Tyler Van Dyke, guys like that, I've also kind of leaned in adding at 10, but I ultimately want Joe Milton, and I do think he'll be around the league for a good amount of time. Moving on to number 9, I do have Jordan Travis. Now, unfortunately, he did suffer a pretty gruesome injury a few weeks ago, so that probably will, tank his draft stock if he does come out this season, and that's pretty unfortunate, but before he got injured, he was leading the Seminoles to an amazing season. An undefeated season even, and unfortunately they still didn't make the college football playoffs, so a bit of controversy there. It's unfortunate, but life goes on. Jordan Travis is a bit on the smaller side of 6'1", 212 pounds, so you do have a little bit of size concerns with the guy, but in 2023 he had 2,755 passing yards, 20 passing touchdowns to go along with 7 rushing touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions. So he does take care of the ball at an exceptional rate. He never really puts the ball into harm's way. As some of his pros, I have his mobility. He's definitely a dual threat quarterback. Maybe not to the extent where, he's going to be an extension of the run game in the NFL. Maybe not to that extent, especially after he comes back from the injury. We got to see how he kind of operates post-injury. Ball security also have as one of the pros, 2 interceptions. So, he doesn't really throw the ball in the harm's way often at all. And then he's also really good at improvising, and that kind of goes along with his mobility. He's able to extend the play, kind of move out of the pocket when needed, and get the ball out to the right receiver. Some of the pros I have is his size, like I spoke about. His progressions, he's a bit slow going through his progressions once the play starts and the ball is snapped. He kind of holds on to his first read a bit longer than you'd like. And then also a pre-snap, I've seen that he kind of had trouble reading certain coverages. So just progressions as a whole, whether that's post-snap, pre-snap, I would like to see him work on that a bit. Other than that, he's a really solid quarterback. I could see him being a really solid backup in the league. I don't really see him having starter upside. And I could see him getting drafted probably day 3 just because of the injury history. And we don't really know how he's going to come back from that injury. So, maybe 5th, 6th, maybe 7th round is where I'd see him being taken. And, more of a project to build up to be that backup quarterback. Moving on to number 8, I do have Spencer Rattler. Now, I was a big quote-unquote hater of Spencer Rattler the past few seasons. I didn't really think he was an NFL caliber quarterback. I didn't really like his attitude, but this past season, he's played really good, and he's earned a spot in my top 10, and probably a lot of people's top 10s. He's a quarterback from South Carolina. He's 6'1", 217 pounds, so not the biggest guy in the world, but you also don't really have size concerns with him. And in 2023, he had 3,186 yards, 19 passing touchdowns to go along with 4 rushing touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. So a bit higher on the interceptions, but that's kind of what you're going to get with a guy like Spencer Rattler. Going into some of his pros, I think he has a really good arm, especially the strength of the arm. I think he can make close to any throw on the field to go along with his release. Like I said, I like guys with quick releases, and I really like Spencer Rattler's release. Some of his cons, though, and one of the cons he's had throughout his college football season, is his inability to play within structure. I like to use the analogy that he sees ghosts in the pocket. He'll try to escape the pocket when it's not really needed. He can still stay in the pocket and deliver the throw, but he likes to move out the pocket, kind of extend the play, and try to find a guy open that way. And in the NFL, that just typically doesn't work as much as it does in college football. So he's worked on it a bit. I think he's better than in previous years, but I still don't think he's going to be able to stay in the pocket and deliver a throw on a consistent basis, which a lot of NFL teams aren't going to like. So I think that's why he's more down to the 8 spot as opposed to like a 5 spot. Also, his decision making isn't the best. He has, a good amount of turnover worthy plays. I don't know off the top of my head how many, but I do know it's on the higher side, and that kind of goes along with his 8 interceptions. So he's more of a gunslinger, and I also don't see him being a starter caliber quarterback, but I could see him filling in a few games here and there and kind of not missing a beat. So that's kind of where I have Spencer Rattler at the moment. Moving on to number 7, I do have Carson Beck. Now, Carson Beck is a bit up in the air on whether he's going to return to Georgia or opt to move to the NFL draft. So as the making of this video, I do still have him in my rankings. And he's a quarterback out of Georgia. He stands at 6'4", 220 pounds, so really good size. And in 2023, he had 3,738 passing yards, 22 passing touchdowns to go along with 4 rushing touchdowns, and then 6 interceptions. And Carson Beck is kind of just that all-around good quarterback. He's not really elite at any particular quarterback trait. He's got a solid arm, he makes solid decisions, solid body, but nothing really blows you out of the water with Carson Beck. I think he's more of a game manager, and I think that's what he'll be in the NFL. And he's pretty comparable to Stetson Bennett, who was a Georgia quarterback for all those years before him. And I think he's a bit better. I think he's got better traits. So I wouldn't be surprised if I see a team fall in love with him and draft him in the 3rd, 4th round, like the Rams did with Stetson Bennett. Some of his cons, though, I do think he's a bit slow in his progressions post-snap. I think he does hold on to his reads a bit longer. And then his inability to improvise is a bit of a problem as well. He's not a bad athlete by any means, but he's not able to extend plays and move through his progressions outside of the pocket, which is something that a lot of teams look for nowadays in their quarterbacks. They don't really want that pocket, or they don't really want that statue in the pocket. So I would like to see him improve on that a bit. But besides that, I think he could be a really solid backup quarterback, or even maybe a starter in the league. I really like Carson Beck a lot. Moving on to number 6, I do have JJ McCarthy, and this might be the first big surprise of the rankings. A lot of people really like JJ McCarthy. They have him as maybe their 3rd or 4th quarterback in the draft. But for me, I'm not quite there on JJ McCarthy. I never have been yet. But there is still room for him to move up in my rankings. The draft doesn't start today. So he's a Michigan quarterback. He's 6'3", 202 pounds. So the weight is a bit of a concern. He's got good height, but at 202 pounds, you really like your quarterbacks to be around that 210 and above. So that's a bit of a concern, but I'm sure he can put on some weight. In 2023, he had 2,603 yards, 19 passing touchdowns to go along with 3 rushing touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So with a guy like J.J. McCarthy, he's just a really solid quarterback. He's not kind of like Carson Beck. He's not going to blow you out the water with anything, but he has a really good arm. He's got really good zip on the ball, and he's also got really good ball security. Besides that Bowling Green game where he had 3 of his 4 interceptions, he's had a really good season, at least turnover-wise. He's not going to put the ball in harm's way. He's going to make the right decision. And I think he's going to be an elite game manager at the next level. I do think he'll get a chance to start in the league depending on which team drafts him. But you would kind of like to see his production be a bit better. At Michigan, they really didn't ask him to do much. They kind of just asked him to run the offense. He never really had, 40, 50 dropbacks in a game. They never really asked him to win games with his arm. They're more of a run-heavy offense. So that's a bit of a question and concern for me. But from what I can see, NFL teams are really high on J.J. McCarthy. And I think NFL teams probably see him more as that third quarterback in the class. But I'm just not there with him. I don't think he's got great anticipation either. So he has room to move up my rankings. But for right now, I'm just not too high on J.J. McCarthy. I think he's more of that game manager. He's not going to win you a game. So I have him at 6 right now, but definitely has room to move up in the rankings. Moving on to number 5, I do have Michael Penix, the lefty out of Washington. He's 6'3", 213 pounds, so pretty good size. And I was really high on Michael Penix to start the season, and I'm still high on him. 5 isn't too low, but I do know a lot of content creators do have him a bit higher. In 2023, he had 4,218 yards, 33 touchdowns to go along with 3 rushing touchdowns and 9 interceptions. So the guy's arm talent is there. The thing that I don't particularly like about Michael Penix is he's a bit of a statue in the pocket. He's not going to really be able to extend plays with his feet. I mean, he might be able to step up into the pocket and maybe scramble for like a 3-yard gain, maybe a 3-yard first down, but he's really more of a statue, similar to a guy like Kirk Cousins, where, all things besides his mobility is really, really solid. Like I say in some of his pros, he's got really good anticipation. He's really accurate with the ball. He can make almost any throw on the field. He's got great velocity on his throws. So everything to do with his arm and mental ability is really good. I like my quarterbacks to be able to do a little bit outside of the pocket and maybe pick up first downs with their feet. And that's just something Michael Penix can't really do. Some of his cons is his injuries. He's had an extensive injury history, but the past 2 seasons, he's been fully healthy, which is a good sign for NFL teams. Again, mobility is a bit of a concern. And then his age, he's also going to be an older rookie coming into the league. But with quarterbacks, age doesn't really matter as much as other positions. I mean, quarterbacks can go into their, mid to late 30s. So if a guy comes in at 24, 25, he's still got a good 10 years if he's a, good quarterback in the league. So age is a bit of an overblown thing, at least for quarterbacks. So I really like Michael Penix. I'm a bit higher on a couple of other quarterbacks just because of their mobility. Moving on to number 4, I do have my guy Jaden Daniels. I'm a big fan of Jaden Daniels. I've watched a little bit more film on him the past couple of days, and I've really grown to like him. Before, a few months ago, I probably had him as like my quarterback 6 or 7. I didn't really think he was a first-round caliber quarterback, but I do now think he is a first-round caliber quarterback. He's a 6'4", 210-pound guy, so decent size. In 2023, he had 3,812 yards, 40 passing touchdowns to go along with 10 rushing touchdowns, and then 4 interceptions. And this guy is the definition of a dual-threat quarterback. He's most likely going to win the Heisman Trophy this year. So I really like Jaden Daniels. As some of his pros, I obviously have his mobility. He can be an extension of the run game in the NFL. And he's also really, really improved on his passing ability. And that was one of my questions I had for Jaden Daniels coming into the season was he's a great runner. He's got great mobility, but can he stand in the pocket and deliver throws in a timely manner? And I think he's improved a lot in that kind of category. I think he's got really good accuracy, especially downfield. His deep ball accuracy is really, really solid. And then his arm, he's got really good arm strength, arm velocity. He can make almost any throw on the field. Just some of the things I want to see him work on is his anticipation and progressions. And I think that's more where he's raw at is he doesn't throw with great anticipation. He's not bad. Don't get it twisted. He's not, he doesn't throw with bad anticipation, but as opposed to some of his other abilities, I think anticipation and progressions are a bit of a weakness for him. But I see him being drafted in the first round, maybe even the top half of the first round. I've seen guys like Mel Kiper and Dane Brugler have him, drafted at like 7 to the Bucks, and I'm not mad at it. I do think there's another quarterback worthy of that QB3 spot, and I'll get to him right now. And his name is Bo Nix. Now, throw out all of the Auburn tape on Bo Nix because it's not the same quarterback as the Oregon Bo Nix. The Oregon Bo Nix is a really, really solid quarterback. He stands at 6'2", 217 pounds, and in 2023, he threw for 4,145 yards, 40 touchdowns to go along with 6 rushing touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions. And I think Bo Nix is just your prototypical solid quarterback. I think he's going to be a consistent top 15 quarterback in the league, in the NFL. I think he throws a really good accuracy, anticipation. He makes good decisions. I think he's everything an NFL team wants. I don't think he's going to lose you many games in the NFL. I think he's just going to be a solid quarterback for a team. Now, some of his cons, I don't think he's a dual threat quarterback by any means. I think that he'll be able to pick up, short yardage first downs if he has to escape the pocket. But I don't think he's going to, be any great dual threat quarterback or nothing like that. And I also think his pocket awareness is a bit subpar. I don't think it's terrible by any means, but he is a bit oblivious to pressure. I think he keeps his eyes downfield a bit longer than he needs to. But besides that, I really, really like Bo Nix. And get it through your guys' head. He is not the same quarterback as he was at Auburn. He's a really, really good quarterback. And that's why I have him at number 3. Moving on to number 2, maybe a bit of a surprise nowadays. I have Drake May, the North Carolina quarterback. He's 6'4", 230 pounds, so really good size. And in 2023, he had 3,354 passing yards, 22 passing touchdowns to go along with 8 rushing touchdowns and 7 interceptions. And I think Drake May has definitely closed the gap between him and my number 1, which is obviously Caleb Williams. I think he's done a good job at closing the gap, and for some people, he's overtaken Caleb Williams, which I just can't get there yet. He's got a really good frame. He's got great accuracy. He stands with a really solid platform to deliver the throws. He's got really good mechanics. The things that I'm a bit skeptical on him about is, for one, he takes unnecessary hits a lot, kind of like a Josh Allen, where you just want to see him slide. If he needs to put his body in harm's way to pick up a first down or a touchdown, I'm fine with it. But sometimes he's already picked up the first down and he's just trying to get like 2 extra yards. Like, you're a really, really important piece to whatever team you're on. So please just get down and, live to see another play. I also think he has a bit too many, turnover-worthy plays. I think he puts the ball in harm's way a bit more than you'd like to see. But with a quarterback, you want a guy that's going to try to win you games and, make the big-time throws. And I think that's Drake May. I just think he has a few too many turnover-worthy plays. I think his 7 interceptions is a bit high. He could easily have had like maybe 10. And also, another thing that I didn't write as one of his cons is I do think he can be a bit flat with the ball at times. At least one of the interceptions I've seen was where he just didn't get the correct, arc on the ball to layer the ball over the defense. He kind of just threw a duck and it went right to the defender. So that was a bit of an ugly interception. I think he needs to do a better job at layering the ball over defenses. But besides that, I think he's a really solid quarterback. I think he's, a top 3 pick in the NFL draft. And I think teams like the Giants, Patriots, Bears maybe, I think any of those teams would be in love with Drake May. And some people might have him as their number 1 quarterback. And, I wouldn't be mad at it, but at my number 1, I do have Caleb Williams. He's been my number 1 since I first seen him play. And maybe the comparisons to Patrick Mahomes was a bit, much to begin the season. But I think he's a really, really good quarterback. He's 6'1", 215 pounds. And in 2023, he had a bit of a down year production-wise with 3,633 yards, 30 touchdowns to go along with 11 rushing touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Now, I don't really get why people are so low on Caleb Williams after this season. Sure, maybe he didn't improve on some of the things you wanted to see him improve on, like, operating an offense within structure and stuff like that. But, he didn't, decline in any of the things he's good at. Like, his arm talent's still, top tier. His improvisation skills are extremely, extremely good. And I mean, he's a dual threat quarterback. I mean, he is an extension of the run game. So I don't really see why people are so down on Caleb Williams after this season. Sure, you'd like to see him work within structure a bit more, but besides that, he's a really, really solid quarterback. And I think he's the best quarterback since Patrick Mahomes. I think he's better than Bryce Young and CJ Stroud coming out of college. I know CJ Stroud is balling out in the NFL, but coming out of college, the prospect CJ Stroud, I think Caleb Williams is a bit better than. I also think he's better than like Kenny Pickett and stuff like that. So I think he's the best quarterback prospect since Trevor Lawrence. But, the people saying that he was the best quarterback prospect since, Andrew Luck is a bit too much. I do think he needs to work on some stuff. I don't think he's a perfect prospect, but I do think he's a potential franchise quarterback, a potential top 3 quarterback in the league. I mean, his upside is just out of this world, but his floor might be a little bit lower than a guy like Drake May, and I can see that's why some people have Drake May above Caleb Williams. But when you're picking at number 1 in the NFL draft, you got to swing for the fences, and I think Caleb Williams could be an absolute home run pick. So that's why I have him at number 1, and that's going to do it for my rankings. Let me know what you guys think. I'm sure there's going to be some rankings that you're not too fond of. Let me know down in the comments. But if you like the video, please consider subscribing and hitting the like button. It really helps the channel out a lot. And I'll be having more rankings, positional rankings coming out in the future. So stay tuned for those. And as always, I'm the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.